right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We are wrapping up week 2 of October, and it's been a busy week. As you may know, we've got space exploration events happening all month long, connecting with scientists and engineers and astronauts who are exploring in our solar system and beyond, but of course, turning the lens back on our planet to look at it in ways we've never been able to before. We've got some really cool conservation events coming up at the end of the month with our Wild Hope partners. We'll be sharing some conservation stories from around the world. And of course, as always, we like to have a nice mixture of science, of exploration, adventure, conservation, engineering for every month that we have action. So if you head to exploringbytheseat.com, you can find all the events we have coming up. There'll be another little newsletter update coming out over the weekend. So we hope to see your classrooms registering and joining us. So let's get into today's action. We have a great crew joining us from Ocean Networks Canada and the BC Earthquake Alliance. And I think you can probably guess we're going to talk about earthquakes today. So one thing that you might not know out there is earthquakes are happening every single day. Of course, really small ones. Sometimes they're unnoticeable, or if they're small enough, they're just not really reported on. But being able to detect those earthquakes right away is really important to try and keep people as safe as possible. So earthquake early warning systems are critical, especially in places like British Columbia. I'm sure you've all heard about the Ring of Fire, which goes along the coast of BC. But even places like Ontario and Quebec, it's important to have that ability to figure out what our planet's doing and to kind of listen in. So really excited to have them joining us today. I am going to reach backstage and I'm going to start by pulling in Lauren Hudson first. Hey, Lauren, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you, Joe?
Great. Well, it's awesome to have you joining us live today. We've got some of your team hanging out backstage. We've got some classrooms registered in places like British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec to hang out with us today. So we're going to get some Q&A a little bit down the line. But yeah, it would be great to let you take over for a bit, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about how to stay safe in the event of an earthquake, because it's not an if an earthquake is going to happen, it's a when for those of us in particular on BC coast here. So we have a presentation we prepared, drop, cover, and hold on. And we've worked with some really cool people at the BC Earthquake Alliance. And I say BC a lot, but as you mentioned, Joe, we do experience earthquakes all around the world and across Canada. So that's what we're going to dive into a little bit today.
All right, perfect.
So should we go for it? Let's do it.
Let's go for it. All
right. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind sharing the screen. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so drop, cover, hold on. That's what we're going to be talking about. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So Lauren, that's me, she, her, our pronouns. I'm a K-12 education coordinator. I am joined by my colleague, Nick. You're going to see him soon here. And also Christine from the BC Earthquake Alliance. And Nick is going to take over the next slide here.
Hey everyone, yeah, my name is Nick, he, him. I also work with Lauren at Ocean Networks Canada, and we're located here in BC, actually in Victoria. So we're part of the University of Victoria, and we're going to do a quick land and sea acknowledgement. You may also have different ones for where you're located, but we're located here in the Victoria area. So we acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands. And we also work with different peoples who we call Wasanich, who are a little bit north of us, but there's various nations in that area too. And actually Ocean Networks Canada has relationships with nations all across Canada. So we're very grateful to work with them and partner on coastal monitoring and data management solutions. We'll go to the next slide. So we're going to have a little outline here for you so that you know what to expect. We're going to talk about what causes earthquakes. We're going to talk about what is Ocean Networks Canada, that's our group. Then Christine will tell us what is BC Earthquake Alliance. We're going to touch on Ocean Networks Canada's Earthquake Information Messaging System, which can keep us safe when an earthquake happens. And we're also going to talk about how we can prepare for earthquakes. And maybe we can start by having Joe play us this video clip here, where we can actually listen to what an earthquake sounds like. Because Ocean Networks Canada, we have microphones underwater, so we can record underwater the sound of an earthquake. So maybe we can listen to that. So that's pretty cool. You can see there the depth was over 2 kilometers underwater, that microphone. So that's pretty cool. And I'll pass it back to Lauren.
Right on. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, that sound is that deep rumbling sound. Hey, it's you can really tell the earth is moving. So let's talk about that. What causes an earthquake? So I want you to think right now, imagine an egg in your head. It's kind of a rough estimation of what our earth is like. So we have a hard-boiled egg. You've got the yolk in the middle. That's kind of like the core. If you were to talk to a geologist, they'd get all specific about all the different layers of the core. And then we have the mantle, and then we have the crust. And the crust is kind of like that eggshell. But what happens is that crust of the earth forms these pieces that are called plates or tectonic plates. So our earth, in this image here, you're seeing all of the different tectonic plates that the earth has on the surface. So we've got here where we are on the North America plate, we're on a huge, large plate, but you can see that it butts up against a number of other plates. And that's actually where this earthquakes can happen. Not the only place, but it's around these tectonic plate boundaries where these earthquakes can happen. So I want you right now to take your hands together, 2 hands, and I want you to, or picture them in your head where the 2 boundaries are. So your hands are like tectonic plates. When the plates are moving apart from each other, we call that a divergent boundary. And you can follow along with me with your hands. When the plates come and transform or slide past each other, that's called a transform boundary. And when the plates come together and one sinks below, that's a convergent boundary. So let's do a quick game. Show me a transform boundary. How about a convergent boundary? One goes under, and a divergent, right? So we have all of these different kind of plate interactions. And a convergent boundary here for us on Vancouver Island, it's a megathrust earthquake, which is a kind of convergent boundary earthquake. And that's the earthquake that we are expecting, the next big one, so-called. So all of the earthquake data is coming into Ocean Networks Canada from number of sensors, underwater sensors, on land sensors, and we put that together in an earthquake data dashboard. And you can see that earthquakes are not all the same. If you've got a big, large circle, can you guess what kind of earthquake that is? If it's a big one or a little one? Yeah, if you thought a big one, you're right. So a larger circle here is a larger magnitude or a larger earthquake. Smaller earthquakes, smaller magnitude, there's going to be that smaller circle. And the position on the earthquake data dashboard shows you where the epicenter is or where that earthquake originates from. So science tells us about earthquakes, but science isn't the only way we know about earthquakes as well. So let's get Nick to come back and tell us how other ways that we know about earthquakes.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, so Ocean Networks Canada, I mentioned before, we work with multiple First Nations, actually all across Canada, but right here, this map, we're specifically highlighting some that we work with on Vancouver Island, which is where we're located. So you can see there's a bunch of different names here. There's a northern region, central region, southern region, and in general, there's a group here called the Nuchalmouth Tribal Council, which is multiple nations. But specifically today, we're going to be we're going to be hearing from somebody named Wickaninnis, also known as Cliff Atleo Sr. He's part of the Ahousaht First Nation. He's actually also a residential school survivor, but he's going to be telling us a little bit about the traditional knowledge that he knows about earthquakes. So maybe we can bring that video up and we can hear from Wiccaninish.
Science observes sometimes animal behavior that we always did. Dog sits up, they know something is there. We don't hear anything, but they've heard it. And so when there's an earthquake coming, animals respond the same way. Every time there's an earthquake, people tell stories about that the animals know first because they hear. And so when you have this thought process of understanding the interconnectedness of everything, you don't disbelieve the reaction of the animal. What you do is observe and learn what they're reacting to or responding to, which is what our people did.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so we're going to quickly move in here to what is Ocean Networks Canada. We've used that name a couple times. Maybe you remember that's the group that Lauren and I work for. But if we go to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit more about that. So we'll have this video playing just in the background. This gives a little bit of a view of what we do underwater. So we actually use robots to put technology on the sea floor. So we can have cameras and microphones down there. We heard that earthquake recording earlier. We can also measure different things about the water, like the temperature and how much oxygen is in the water. And we can also measure for earthquakes too. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see a little bit about that. So another thing that we can do is have something called an accelerometer in the sea floor. So in the video there on the right, you might be able to see that green circle. That's actually a big pipe that we've drilled a hole in the sea floor, put this pipe in, and that pipe is actually so big that I could stand in it and have my arms out like this and touch both sides of the pipe. So it's really big. And we're putting this sphere, this ball in there, and that's the accelerometer. So what it does is it detects when there's movement of the seafloor. You might have heard of acceleration before, right? When something's speeding up. So that's kind of what this machine does too, accelerometer. It detects when something's moving. So when an earthquake happens, that moves the seafloor, and then this machine will let us know. So, speaking of earthquakes, maybe now it's time for us to bring in our other special guest, Christine.
Thanks, Nick. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a topic that's really important. My name is Christine, and my pronouns are she, her. And today I'm joining you from the traditional shared and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the BC Earthquake Alliance. We are a not-for-profit society. This is our 15th year this year, and our mandate is to ensure that everyone is aware of earthquakes and that they're prepared for earthquakes. And what that means, we know we've got some friends with us from other parts of Canada. Well, our main role is British Columbia, and we have the largest drill in Canada here. We also have friends who join us from the Yukon, from Alberta, and for those of you from Quebec and Ontario, there's another set of friends who organize a similar drill through Le Grand Secousse. And we'll talk only briefly today, because we don't have a lot of time, about the connection with tsunami preparedness. So some of you may have heard of our earthquake drill that happens on the third Thursday of every year. And so that's next week on October 16th. And that's the Great BC Shakeout. And that's the opportunity we hope that everyone who lives, works, plays, and studies in BC at any point will practice that drill with us. And here you can see some school students who are doing the drop, cover, hold on drill with perfect form. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later on.
All right. So earthquakes, they form different kinds of waves. Nick, did you want to tell us about these ones?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Thank you. Yeah, so we have two different kinds of waves here that we're looking at. Earthquakes form multiple different kinds, but we'll focus on these two here, P waves and S waves. So we have pressure waves. That's what the P stands for. They're fast, but they don't cause much damage. So those ones can come out first when an earthquake happens. And then there's another type of wave, S wave or shear wave, and they're slow, but they cause the shaking and destruction that we associate with an earthquake. So there's these two kinds, and the important part is the P wave is fast. We can detect that first before the S wave gets to us because that one's much slower, but that's the dangerous one. So if we go to the next slide, this is how we can detect that. So we have this map here, and you might be able to see there's a bunch of blue and red dots scattered around the map there. There's some in the water, and then there's some also on Vancouver Island. And those blue and red dots, those are the stations where we have these detectors. You know, we looked at that accelerometer earlier. These are the ones that might detect the shaking. So you might be able to detect that P wave first, the pressure wave, the fast one, using these sensors, and then they can give a warning for the land before the S wave arrives on land. So if we go to the next slide, these are some things that we can use that system for. So it's called Earthquake Information Messaging System. This is a system that Ocean Networks Canada, our group, is developing. So these things are not all ready yet, but this is something that we want to do in the future. So we're working on this right now. So of course, like Christine's going to tell us more about drop, cover, and hold on. So that's definitely the number one thing that you would want to do when this system detects something. And it might send out an alert to everybody's phone, for example. But we could also send out these automatic messages immediately when the first wave is detected before the shaking arrives. We could, for example, warn airports to divert arrivals for incoming air traffic and also ship vessels. We could automatically open fire and ambulance doors at the halls where the trucks are. We could trigger trains to slow down or stop. For example, if you have a subway system in your area, we could stop bridge and tunnel traffic. We could automatically close bridges and tunnels. And we could automatically send messages to hospitals to tell doctors and surgeons to stop delicate procedures. If they're about to do an operation, they don't want to do that if an earthquake is starting, right? So we can use this earthquake information messaging system to automatically send these signals when the first P wave is detected before the S wave arrives and we have all the shaking. So I think that'll be enough for me for right now. But if we move to the next slide, Christine can tell us more about earthquake preparedness.
Thanks, Nick. And so what we're going to do in the next couple of slides is talk about some ways that you can learn more about earthquakes and how to prepare for them. So if we flip to the next slide, there we go. One of the things that we have available, we like to do education. That's our main mandate. And so we've created some stories called Quake Tales that are available from our website. And they share people from in BC who have lived through a major earthquake or tsunami. So pictured here, we have a gentleman who's now a retired fire chief. And he has a story that he shares about the tsunami in Port Alberni. And in his experience, he gives examples. He was a young man home from college at the time when the tsunami happened. And so he shares his experience and that of his friends in the community. And so these are really good things to look at, and they give you a really good sense of what we can think about experiencing, not just in hours, but maybe in the days and weeks and months following a major earthquake. In this case, the tsunami was caused by an earthquake in Alaska. So these are some resources, because we won't get to everything today. And we can flip to the next slide, please. So some of the things that we want you to think about are that earthquakes can happen anywhere in British Columbia. We want to be prepared, and in other places in Canada and the world where you may be vacationing. So our friends have done a really good job of talking about some of those quakes. What we want you to know is to drop cover and hold on immediately. And so I say immediately, as Nick mentioned, if you get an alert, we don't have a lot of time, and sometimes the alert might not come in time to give you warning. So if you feel the earth start to shake, or you get an alert on your device, then you are going to drop immediately to the ground so that you don't fall over. If you can, you're going to take cover under a sturdy piece of furniture, like a desk. You've probably practiced that in school. And then you're going to hold on to that sturdy piece of furniture, because in a major earthquake, things are going to be moving around and the furniture could move away from you. And that could leave you open to things that might fall on you, and that would cause injury. So your safest step is to drop cover, hold on immediately. And we say, if you're able, there may be times where there's no sturdy furniture nearby for you to get under. And so we're going to show you some adaptations, and we do have some resources available for you. We also want you to think about some people may have some extra needs, and it might not be possible for them to drop to the ground or move to a sturdy piece of furniture. So we have safe adaptations. And so that might be classmates or teachers or elders in your household. So we want everyone to be aware. And we know that you as students, if you've practiced in schools, are really good at reassuring your parents and providing them with good information. So the safe and appropriate adaptations, those would be things like the lock cover hold on for people who are in wheelchairs. And we'll give you some examples of that. Now, practicing your emergency plan and your earthquake drill are really important. Just like when we learn a new language, or for any of you who are athletes, you're learning a sport, you need lots of practice, and then things become second nature. So it's often that people do the opposite of what they're meant to if they're scared. So we really want to practice that drop, cover, hold on. 3 times a year is what we recommend in different locations, because you won't always be with a teacher in your classroom and near a sturdy school desk. Maybe think about where you could be. Some of you might have jobs, or maybe you're out walking the dog or something else. Just think about where you might be. And I say make a game of it so that you have some experience and you've thought through alternatives. Next slide, please. And another thing that you can do, here's a picture of the earthquake simulator called the Quake Cottage, and you can see a number of school students lining up to check this out. If you have an opportunity, in addition to practicing your drill, visiting a simulator can give you a really good sense of why we need to drop cover and hold on where we are immediately, and not try to run or move to another place where maybe we think there's a better place to take cover. The effects of a major earthquake are likely to last weeks or months. So we do encourage everyone to practice and collect supplies and be ready to be self-sufficient for even 14 days is what we tell people, depending on the area of risk. And we encourage you to keep learning. Our website has a lot of resources that can help you feel more prepared. We do have a free webinar coming up on October 15th at 7 p.m. Pacific time during Shakeout Week that's called Ask the Expert. And there you'll have more opportunities to learn about emergency preparedness, listen to 2 seismologists, but take time to continue learning. It's not just what we talk about today. You want to keep practicing and learning. Next slide, please. And so some of the adaptations here are thinking about things like what you would do if you were in bed. And what you can see there from the picture is that the bed is a safe place to be. So you can actually cover up with your blankets and pillows and flip over on your belly to protect your internal organs, for example. And there are a few other things here that you can think about as alternatives, but always think about the closest to the drop cover hold on as your base. Next slide, please. And that, I'll leave you there for the moment. I think we've got time for question and answers, so I'll turn it back to our hosts.
All right, let's get everybody back in here. Christine, Lauren, and Nick, thank you so much for that great presentation. It's a pretty impressive array of sensors there off the coast of BC. And obviously it is really important, just like other things like tornadoes, which I guess we worry maybe a little bit more in Ontario as opposed to earthquakes, but it's great. The more warning we have for something like that, the better chance people can do something to protect themselves, and their loved ones. Okay, well, let's get into some Q&A action. I want to start off with the first question. This is from a class in Toronto, and they're noticing that the equipment's underwater. How do you maintain sensors that are found deep underwater?
Lauren,
I can answer that one.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So maintaining a whole series of instruments, we have about 20,000 sensors. They don't just measure earthquakes, but what we do is we have an annual expedition that goes out, make sure that the sensors are in working order. That often means diving with remotely operated vehicles. So that's bringing on a whole set of crew members with expertise in running these robots. So sensors are swapped out, new sensors are added, and yeah, that is an annual thing that our team is part of. And Ocean Networks Canada employs a whole bunch of engineers, people that do the science side of things, people that do the data part of it. We even have librarians. So it takes a whole crew of people with a variety of expertise and background to be able to maintain that. That's a great question. Thanks from Toronto.
Okay, let's grab another question here from the chat. This is another class in Ontario. Now we know that there's a plate kind of off the coast in British Columbia, but there isn't really a plate under somewhere like Ontario. So how could an earthquake happen in an area like that?
Well, I know that sometimes oil drilling in Alberta and stuff has been known to cause earthquakes. So anytime we are disrupting the natural way of the planet, there is the potential for things to happen. So I know drilling and mining can create earthquakes. Anything else that you're aware of, Christine or Nick?
Christine, I'll let you go first.
Sure. I mean, we do know that there is risk, in particular in Eastern Ontario, and that's why Le Grand Secousse is doing work to educate. And so that certainly we hear people in Ottawa as well talking about the risk there. So we do know there is some risk. Nick?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you maybe know that all of North America as a continent is on top of a tectonic plate, a piece of the Earth called the North American plate. So you are right that there are fewer earthquakes, or there's not as much of a risk in Ontario and Quebec compared to in BC and on the Pacific coast, for example. But it still could happen anywhere because all of these plates are moving around, kind of the analogy that Lauren was talking about before with if you have a hard-boiled egg, right, where you have the shell, like the crust of the earth that's on the outside of the egg. The egg is our planet, right? So all of those pieces of the shell can move around, and so we don't actually know 100% like how it works and how they move, and it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. So definitely, yes, there is less of a risk, but sometimes unexpected things can happen, and there is a history of having earthquakes in Ontario and Quebec, right? So that's why there's this system that Christine was mentioned that's being built in your area.
All right. So a student here, this is from Lily, noticed that a lot of the sensors appear to be in the water. Are there any sensors on land to help detect earthquakes?
You betcha.
Yeah, there are. So, and touching on just the previous question about how do we fix the sensors and how do we work on them. So because everything is connected with cables and it's connected to the internet, we actually get data immediately, right? It's all in real time. We're getting these measurements. So we can also see right away when something stops working. So that's how we know if we need to fix something. But yes, to answer your question, there are sensors on land and in the ocean, and both are important for different reasons. Lauren and I were actually talking with some of our scientist friends before this presentation to learn more, because they're the real experts on this. They do every day, they're studying earthquakes and they do work on our earthquake detection system. But the point is that there's a whole bunch of different sensors that do different things. They also use something that's similar to a GPS. So you've probably heard of that. That's like the thing that's in your phone or in your car that tells you where you are. They have a really fancy, expensive version of that that can be very accurate with these sensors to detect when they move. It's basically a satellite that monitors when these sensors are moving. So they monitor on land and in the ocean, and they kind of do different things. The ones in the ocean can give us that advanced warning when shaking happens, and the ones on land can give us a more precise measurement about how big the earthquake is, the exact magnitude of it.
All right. Okay, great questions coming here in the chat. This is an interesting one. This is from a 4-5 class in Kitchener, Ontario. And actually, I've never thought of this before. So we always hear that in California, they're waiting for the big one. Is that something that people worry about in British Columbia as well?
Yeah, I'll take this, Nick, and maybe Christine too. You want to add something in, but definitely Nick introduced Wickaninnish Cliff Atleo, and actually we learned from Nachalnath, Indigenous members of the Nachalnath group, that there was an earthquake in the 1700s that caused a tsunami, and the tsunami, that information of that tsunami was passed down generation to generation. So we know that that earthquake happened, that tsunami happened, and it actually wiped out a whole tribe of people. So because of that Indigenous history and Indigenous knowledge, we know that this has happened in the past. So we are expecting another earthquake to occur. Christine or Nick, do you want to add something to that?
Thanks, Lauren. And, what we're talking about in British Columbia is really that we're overdue for the big ones. So recently we've had a number of more moderate shakes that have really caused people to pay attention. What the scientists are telling us is that sometime in the next 50 years, we can anticipate that there will be a major earthquake in British Columbia. The challenge is that we can't determine whether that might be tonight or in the longer term. So we're really encouraging everyone to be prepared, so that they can be more safe and comfortable. And that's even if you're coming to visit. We often say guests need to prepare as well, even if they don't live here in British Columbia. Okay.
Well, Lauren, you just mentioned tsunamis, and we just happen to have a question about tsunamis here in the chat. Let me bring it up here. This is from a class in Surrey, BC. And they're wondering if the sensors in this network, can they give us information about tsunamis, or is there a different way that we know that maybe that's a risk?
Yeah, tsunamis are actually, we use a different set of tools to detect tsunamis. And they're actually radar, they're land-based. So we have a number of land-based radar. It's called WERA. And they are stationed in areas that we know we know tsunamis happen. So yeah, it's a whole different set of instruments. And that's how we get up to that 20,000 sensors kind of number. We've got lots of different instruments, and each instrument is specific to detecting different types of data or different types of changes in the Earth, in the planet.
Okay, so the same class in BC, you talked about, what to do if you're inside, a little bit like if you're in your bed to turn over and things like that. What if you're outside? You're outside playing soccer or something. What's kind of the best practice to do if you're outside and you get a warning or feel the ground shake?
Thanks, Joe. And so in that situation, again, and this is why you want to practice, think about the closest that you can do to the drop, cover, hold on. So you're still going to drop immediately. If you can look around, hopefully you can avoid dropping underneath power lines, for example, or something that could fall on you. If you're in a space that perhaps has picnic tables or something, you can see a post actually of someone modeling that on our website. You can try to take cover under something sturdy like that. But again, you're going to want to drop immediately where you are. If you can't cover, then you can still, underneath something, then you can still protect your head and neck. Sometimes we see students cover themselves, maybe if they're not playing soccer, but if they're in some place where they have their backpack, they can maybe grab something to help cushion their head and neck so that anything that's flying around, any debris, will not injure them.
Okay. And I can see we have a little screen share here that shows you some things you can do if you're in bed, you're outside, maybe in the car, things like that. All right, very cool. Okay, I've got a couple more questions here, and we've got time to squeeze a couple more in. In the picture that you shared of some of those underwater sensors, Kevin noticed that there was some sea life there. So is marine life interested in those sensors?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. Maybe they're not interested in it in a special way more so than the rest of their environment, but more so just that they cover everything no matter what, right? So, for example, we have some sensors in the Campbell River area, and there's a lot of urchins that live there, sea urchins, the ones that are like a ball of spikes. And it's a kind of a funny story because we have a camera there, but in the past we could never use the camera because there were so many sea urchins that they would cover the camera. They would crawl right on top of it, and every time you looked out the camera, you would just see spikes in your face like this, and that was it. So absolutely, we have lots of animals that make their homes on our equipment. Again, not on purpose. They're not like overly attracted to it necessarily, but just they live everywhere. And when we're down at the bottom of the ocean, we don't have our lights on all the time because we don't want to disrupt the sea life, of course, but we do turn the lights and the cameras on usually 5 minutes every hour just to record once an hour a little bit of what's going on. And then we can see all the life around us. And there's lots of things. There's octopus, there's fish swimming by, there's lots of things. But, in general, we try to be as, we try to disrupt as little as possible.
All right, so we have a little video playing. We can see some sea life there. Very cool. Okay, so we've got a class, another class in BC. They're in Pitt Meadows. And you had mentioned that there's kind of the two different waves, and the first one can be detected before you actually feel the shaking. So in a perfect world, or like maybe the goal for detection, how much time can be given on average, to get one of those warnings out to phones?
Okay, well, there's no average. Everything depends on the epicenter. It's going to depend on the magnitude. It's going to depend on what kind of earthquake it is. So really, we're not promising much. It could be seconds to up to about 45 seconds is kind of the upper range right now. And as we study and learn more about earthquakes, more about the waves that are produced, we are getting a better understanding of what we might be able to anticipate in terms of that timing. So really, even seconds though can make a difference when there's some automation that happens in terms of protecting people. So yeah, so many factors into it, which is why earthquakes are an important thing to study and to understand.
Of course, absolutely. Okay, so last question. I'm just thinking about, citizen science is something that's really important. There's places around the world where people can turn on webcams or see what sensors are showing. Is there somewhere classrooms can go? Are there any cameras? Are there any of the sensors that classrooms can see any live data?
Oh, yeah. Nick, are you going to tell us? And I'll see what I
Sure.
can bring up.
I see you searching right there.
Yeah,
So maybe we'll bring something up, but absolutely there's places where people can go to learn more. So we're Ocean Networks Canada. So we do have a website, oceannetworks.ca, and there's different dashboards that you can check out. So for example, Lauren here is bringing up the earthquake data dashboard. So this shows us a live view of all of the earthquakes that we've detected in the last year. We only list the ones there that are magnitude 4 or bigger. There's, of course, lots of little ones that aren't listed there, but you can go on there to find information about that. There's different dashboards that also show video data from the different cameras that we have underwater and all of the different sensors that measure different things about the water. So for example, like the temperature and the salinity, the oxygen. And we also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to watch cool things underwater, we have a YouTube channel with kind of like highlight clips and videos about the research expeditions that we do, where we have ships going out to sea. So there's lots of different things to check out there.
Okay, perfect. Oceannetworks.ca is where you want to head and check that out. That's great. Okay, well, we did pretty good. We're right hitting end time of the event right now. I want to start off, as always, with a huge shout out to our classrooms. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know there's a lot more classrooms who will be tuning in to the recording, which will be available on the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants YouTube channel. So a shout out to the classrooms who will be catching this next week. And then Christine, Lauren, and Nick, thank you so much for letting us steal a little bit of your time and sharing the really cool work that the BC Earthquake Alliance and Ocean Networks Canada does, especially during Science Literacy Week.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend. I hope to see classrooms joining us all throughout October for some more live event action. Keep your eyes out for the next newsletter. But for now, we're going to sign off. And until we see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.